Good Thursday evening. I'm Carolyn Bruck in Atlanta, and this is Scripps News Tonight. The House is heading on a holiday break without a funding deal for Ukraine and Israel. Just 2 days ago, the president of Ukraine went to Washington to plead for an immediate renewal of aid. He warned that funding was needed for his country to defeat Russia. Today, though, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson allowed a planned holiday recess to go ahead. This over the objection of both the White House and Senate Democrats. Now, it comes as Republicans are insistent that funding for U.S. allies, including Ukraine and Israel, must be paired with aid for U.S. border protection and stricter migration policies. In the Senate, a bipartisan deal on border policy is in the works, but it's not yet finished.
Over the last few days, negotiations on a path forward to getting national security supplemental done have made good progress. The Senate will return on Monday. That will give negotiators from the White House, Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, a time to work through the weekend in an effort to reach a framework agreement.
Now, Speaker Johnson, in the meantime, has been clear their original offer stands. No need to wait for the Senate.
It is not the House's issue right now. The issue is with the White House and the Senate. And I implore them to do their job because the time is urgent, and we do want to do the right thing here.
So, no funding for Ukraine or for Israel, at least not yet. But let's check where things stand now on Capitol Hill and if both the House and Senate will be in session together anytime soon. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed has more for us. Nate, what is the latest?
Days after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made his third trip to Capitol Hill since the war in Ukraine began, the House of Representatives has left town for the holiday recess, saying they will not return until early January of 2024, leaving Ukraine aid in limbo. Democrats blasting the move by House Republicans, saying that this could lead to Russia winning the war.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist, if you are serving in Congress, immersed in these national security issues, to understand that if we allow Vladimir Putin to run through Ukraine, that his next target will be a NATO country, which means that American military men and women will be in the fight.
Republicans have made clear, however, that it's near impossible to pass additional aid to Ukraine without reaching a deal about major border policy changes at the southern border with Mexico. While bipartisan negotiations continue in the U.S. Senate, those negotiations haven't wrapped up, and even if they do wrap up in the coming days, the House of Representatives has already left Washington, meaning nothing can get approved, sent to President Biden's desk until 2024. Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News, Capitol Hill.
So let's take a look at what is in the bill as of now. It's a total of just over $110 billion to help on a range of global issues. It includes aid to Ukraine and Israel, as well as humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza, but also to allies in the Asia-Pacific region, including Taiwan. Now, some of the money would stay here in the U.S. $1 billion would be used for security at Jewish and Muslim religious institutions. Additional aid would be set aside to help process migrants and to stop fentanyl trafficking at the border. Democrats, they're not happy about that immigration policy being tied to aid for Ukraine and Israel, especially any potential long-term policy changes. They see it as an entirely separate issue and worry tying them all together could actually weaken the president's hand.
The White House, and I've said this, should not have put border policy together with foreign aid.
Trading permanent policy changes for short-term, one-time funding is a bad deal.
I think Biden needs to know. We've seen this movie before. We don't like the ending, and we're not going to tolerate the ending.
I don't want the clock turned back to the Trump days of detention centers and children's in cages and people being separated. I'm sticking with Biden-Harris, and I'm going to trust them. But if they send that supplemental, that's one time I'm going to say, sorry, I can't vote for you on this.
The politics are one thing, but there are very real consequences of holding up this aid. Joining us now is Bruce Dayton, an associate professor at the School for International Training. All right, let's start with Ukraine. President Zelensky, he told American leaders that Putin has to lose, and basically said U.S. aid to Ukraine was the main way to achieve that. But is it as simple as that? Is it as cut and dry?
No, I don't think it is as simple as that. I think the problem now is that both sides are stuck in faulty thinking that only by escalating their own commitment and applying more pressure to have the other side capitulate will they have achieved their interests. And of course, both sides are doing that simultaneously. So we're stuck in what is called a ladder of escalation, where every step each side takes to try to force the other side to capitulate merely reinforces their own will to take additional actions to try to get the other side to back down. And it's hard to see how that kind of thinking will ever end in an ending of the horrible suffering that's occurring in Ukraine right now.
I mean, we can all agree that it is absolutely horrific. U.S. aid, though, so critical, some say, because U.S. aid signals to other countries who are providing aid that we still support it and we still back it. If we aren't funding, what will these other countries do?
Well, I expect that Europe will do its best to make up for anything that the United States is not providing. I think there's a great willingness on the part of the U.S., or I'm sorry, on the part of Europe to continue to support Ukraine. Today we saw Europe is inviting Ukraine to begin negotiations for entering the European Union. And I think that's all signaling to Russia that even in the absence of U.S. leadership on this issue, Europe is going to stand strong. But I do expect that there's a lot of domestic politics involved in the impasse now between Republicans and Democrats. I expect that they will get to a deal, and that deal will involve some kind of trade-offs between border security, which is what Republicans want, and funding to both Ukraine and Israel.
Sure. When it comes to military aid and on-the-ground fighting, how important is U.S. war machinery to Ukraine and Israel at this very moment?
Well, it's critical. In the case of Ukraine, it's critical for keeping the Russians from overrunning Ukraine. So in that sense, both Israel and Ukraine rely very much on U.S. military aid, but that's not a long-term solution. You can't bomb your way to a negotiated settlement. Eventually, negotiations will have to take place. And what I would like to see is the Biden administration and others begin to talk seriously about what does an off-ramp look like when it comes to Ukraine.
You say negotiations. Is there any negotiating with Putin?
Well, that's an open question. I think in general, if Putin thinks that he can achieve everything he wants without having to engage in a negotiated process with Ukraine or the West, he probably won't come to the negotiation table. But that's why I think U.S. military support should be a case of carrots and sticks, providing aid, but also using the promise of entering into negotiation when the time is right, when Putin realizes that he stands to gain more through engagement than he does by fighting. I mean, after all sorts of parties can enter into negotiations. We saw a couple of weeks ago that even Hamas and Israel were able to work through Qatar as a mediator and reach a temporary pause in the violence there. So if it's possible between Israel and Hamas, I certainly think some things are possible even with an actor like Putin.
How do you see this ending?
Well, I don't see this ending the way that many U.S. politicians were hoping. They were hoping that Putin would be overthrown, or the Russian army was going to collapse, or Ukraine winning. And it's pretty clear now that none of those three scenarios is likely to take place. So the ending eventually will have to occur through negotiations. And my view is those should begin, even if they begin through very subtle back-channel diplomacy, they should begin sooner rather than later. I think we are going to have to get to a point where there are terms for a ceasefire, where a geographical line that's temporary is formed, that both sides agree to respect, and we can enter a cool down period where serious negotiated settlements under undeniably very, very difficult issues can begin to take place.
Let's get back to the aid, because a core argument that we hear against any project abroad or any time the U.S. is sending aid, whether it's humanitarian aid or financial funding for a war, you hear people say, why are we sending money abroad when we have so many problems here at home? So what is the advantage for the United States in sending foreign aid?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always tell my own students you can do more than one thing at the same time when it comes to the State Department and the Department of Defense. So, I mean, I understand those concerns, but it's not a zero-sum issue. We can deal with the southern border at the same time that we support our allies and friends overseas. So I think the problem is that we tend to view these issues in simple binaries, and they're not. The U.S. has an interest in promoting freedom abroad, in promoting U.S. interests abroad, in supporting human rights, in the protection of innocent civilians abroad. That, I think, is core to our national interest, and it can be done at the same time that we take care of many of the domestic challenges we're facing at home.
Certainly complex issues. Conversation does help, so we thank you for that. Bruce Dayton from the School for International Training, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And still to come on Scripps News tonight, the holidays, they're a time to gather, the family, snuggle up and count your blessings, right? But for families of Hamas hostages, they're holding their breath, hoping and praying they'll be reunited with their loved ones sooner rather than later. We're going to speak to the son of an elderly hostage who's praying for a miracle. And the fate of an abortion drug is up in the air on the state and national level. What abortion rights groups are doing now to ensure access to the abortion pill.